When I opened the door that morning, the first thing I saw was the moving truck parked in front of my house. The engine was running, 2 men were waiting for instructions, and my son Mark was standing next to Samantha, my daughter-in-law, with that expression I knew so well, that mix of poorly hidden guilt and cowardice that kept him from looking me in the eyes. Samantha smiled at me, a fake, bright smile, as if she were doing the whole world a favor. I took a deep breath. I felt the cold morning air fill my lungs, filling me with something I wasn't sure was rage or just the exhaustion of so many years of putting up with it, so many years of silence, so many years of being invisible in my own life. The movers looked at me, waiting for a signal. One of them, the younger one, was holding a clipboard. They probably already had a list of what they were supposed to take. Mark had probably given them precise instructions. As always, without consulting me, as if I didn't exist, as if this house wasn't mine, as if my voice didn't matter. But that morning, for the first time in a long time, my voice was going to matter. I slowly approached the men from the truck. Samantha stopped smiling. Mark took a step back, as if sensing that something had changed. And he was right. Something had changed. I had changed. I looked at the movers and told them calmly, with a tranquility that surprised even me. "Good morning, gentlemen. You can load everything you need. There's no problem. But you are not taking the furniture." There was a silence. One of those heavy, uncomfortable silences where everyone waits for someone to speak, but no one dares. Samantha was the first to react. "What do you mean, no?" "Eleanor, we already talked about this. The bed is perfect for our room. We'll leave you your old one. Don't be difficult." Difficult. That word. As if asking for respect was complicating things. As if defending what's yours was a whim. As if existing was an inconvenience. I kept looking at the movers. I didn't answer her. It didn't make sense to talk to Samantha anymore. She had stopped listening to me a long time ago. "Gentlemen," I repeated with the same calm, "you can load up, but not the furniture. Take these 2, with all their things." The silence now was absolute. Even the birds seemed to have stopped singing. The truck's engine was still running, a constant hum filling the void of that frozen moment. Mark finally spoke. "Mom, what are you saying? Don't start this now. Now." As if there were a convenient time to defend myself. As if there were a correct hour to say enough. As if my dignity had office hours. Samantha approached me. Her smile was completely gone. Now there was only that hard expression, that cold look she used when something didn't go her way. "Eleanor, I don't know what's gotten into you today, but this is ridiculous. The bed is already decided. Mark already promised it for our house. You can't back out now." Promised. As if my bed were something he could promise. As if my things were his property. As if I were just another piece of furniture in this house, something that could be moved around without asking permission. But I wasn't that piece of furniture anymore. I wasn't that woman who nodded in silence. I wasn't the mother who swallowed humiliation just to avoid problems. That woman was dead, and in her place, there was me. The real me. The one who had always been there but whom I hadn't dared to let out. I took an envelope out of my apron pocket. An envelope with papers I had found 2 days earlier, papers I had forgotten existed, papers that changed everything. "Samantha," I said, looking her directly in the eyes, "this house has a deed, and that deed is in my name. Only my name. Every piece of furniture here, every plate, every cent that was used to buy anything in this house, came from my work, from my hands, from my years of effort." I showed her the documents. She looked at them as if they were a trap, as if I had invented something to ruin her day. Mark turned pale. I think in that moment he realized everything. All the years he had allowed his wife to treat me as if I didn't matter. All the times he stayed quiet when he should have spoken. All the humiliations he let pass because it was easier to ignore me than to defend me. "So, yes," I continued, "the gentleman can load up. But you 2 are leaving. With your things. With your clothes. With everything you brought into my house. Because this is my house, not yours." Samantha tried to speak, but I raised a hand. I wasn't going to let her interrupt me. Not this time. This time, they were going to hear me out. "You're going to pay dearly for this, Eleanor." "I'm not." But she couldn't finish the sentence. Because in that instant, the movers were already entering the house. Not to take my bed, to take Mark and Samantha's suitcases, to take out their boxes, their clothes, everything they had brought when they came to live with me 3 years ago. 3 years that felt like 30. 3 years of being treated like a shadow in my own life. Samantha screamed something. I don't remember what. Her screams blended with the noise of the truck, with the sound of boxes being dragged across the hardwood floor, with the echo of my own heartbeat in my ears. I was trembling, not from fear, from something different, something that felt like freedom. Mark stood frozen in the middle of the yard, watching them take his things out. He didn't say anything else. Maybe there was nothing left to say. Maybe he had finally understood that this time he wasn't going to convince me to change my mind, that this time there was no going back. When the last mover came out with the last box, I stood in the doorway. Samantha got into the car, furious, slamming the door so hard it made the windows rattle. Mark looked at me one last time. There was something in his eyes that might have been regret. Or maybe it was just surprise. Surprise at discovering that his mother, the woman who always gave in, who always made herself small so others could be big, had finally said no. The truck left. The car left. And I was left alone in the yard, with the envelope of papers still in my hand, feeling the morning sun on my face, a sun that suddenly seemed brighter, an air that suddenly seemed cleaner, a silence that suddenly sounded like music. I closed the door slowly. I walked to my room, to my bed. That bed I had bought with my savings, with my effort, with every dollar I had saved for months, sacrificing little pleasures to have something that was just mine. Something that represented that I still existed, that I still mattered, that I still owned something in this world. I sat on the edge of the bed and, for the first time in a long time, I smiled. A real smile. The kind that starts from within, from a deep place where the dignity I should never have lost resides. But to understand how I got to that moment, to understand why that bed was so important, why what they tried to do was so painful, I need to go back. I need to tell you how it all began, what my life was like before that day, before I discovered I could say no, before I understood that self-love isn't selfishness, before I learned that defending what is yours doesn't make you a bad person. I need to go back to the beginning, to the time when I was still that woman who believed that sacrifice was the same as love, that woman who confused submission with kindness, that woman I was for 72 years of my life, until one day, finally, I woke up. My life was always simple, so simple that sometimes I wondered if it was enough. If a life made of small routines, of repeated gestures, of days that looked just like each other, could be considered a full life. But when you are 72 years old and you look back, you realize that simplicity is not the same as emptiness, and that a modest life can be full of meaning, even if no one else notices. I lived in a small house on the outskirts of the city. A house I bought 30 years ago when I was still cleaning office buildings at night. A house with 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, a kitchen that always smelled of freshly brewed coffee and toast. The walls needed paint. The floors creaked when you walked down the hall. But it was mine. Or so I thought. I got up every morning at 6. Even after retiring, my body kept waking up at that hour, as if the years of waking up early were etched into my bones. I'd make coffee, sit by the kitchen window, and watch the garden as the sun began to rise. Those were my favorite minutes of the day, the only minutes when everything was still, when no one needed anything from me, when I could just exist without having to justify my existence. Then came the rest. Washing the clothes, cleaning the house, making breakfast for Mark and Samantha, who had been living with me for 3 years. 3 years that felt like 30. 3 years in which my house stopped being my refuge and became a hotel where I was the only employee. Mark is my only son. I raised him alone after his father left us when he was just 5 years old. I worked as hard as I could to give him an education, clean clothes, food on the table. It was never much, but it was always enough. Or so I thought. Maybe I was wrong. Maybe by giving him everything without expecting anything in return, I taught him that I deserved nothing. That my role in life was to serve and be quiet. When Mark married Samantha, I was happy. I thought I'd finally have company. that the house would stop feeling so empty, that maybe we could be a real family, not just two people sharing a roof out of obligation. At first, everything seemed fine. Samantha was nice. She helped me with the food, chatted with me in the afternoons, asked me how my day had been, but little by little, that kindness dissolved like wet paper. It started with small comments, observations that seemed innocent but carried hidden venom. "Eleanor, why do you use so much oil for cooking? It's wasteful. Eleanor, don't put the laundry there. It takes up too much space. Eleanor, could you stay in your room tonight? We have friends coming over and we need the living room." Every comment was a small stone. And over time, those stones became a wall that separated me from my own life. That pushed me into the corners of my house. That turned me into an awkward guest in the place I myself had built. Mark never said anything. When Samantha spoke to me like that, he would look the other way. He'd get on his phone. He'd go outside to smoke in the yard. He'd do anything but defend me. And his silence hurt more than her words. Because Samantha was a stranger, but Mark was my son, the boy I had held in my arms, the boy I had worked for until my bones ached, the boy who was supposed to take care of me when I could no longer take care of myself. But children aren't always what we expect. Sometimes they become strangers who live under your roof, who eat your food, who sleep in your house, who benefit from your sacrifice, but who never really look at you, who never see you as a whole person, only as a function, as someone who is there to make their lives easier. My days became mechanical. Wake up, clean, cook, wash, iron, clean again. Sometimes I wondered when I had stopped living and started just surviving, when I had stopped being Eleanor, a woman with dreams and desires, and had become a shadow moving through the house doing chores that no one appreciated. But there was something I kept just for me, a small secret that kept me alive inside. A glass jar hidden behind the old pots in the kitchen. Inside that jar, I kept money. Not much. $5 here, $10 there. Every time I went to the market and had some change left over, every time I found a forgotten coin in a pants pocket, every time I could save even a little without anyone noticing. I had been saving for months, months of sacrificing little things. I didn't buy the Danish I liked. I didn't take the bus when I could walk. I didn't turn on the heat even when it was cold. I just put on an extra sweater. Every dollar I saved represented something. It represented that I still had my own will, that I could still make decisions, that I still existed as something more than an unpaid maid. And what was I saving for? To buy a new bed. I know it sounds silly. I know there are more important things. I know a bed doesn't change a life. But for me, that bed meant everything. My current bed was over 20 years old. The springs were shot. The mattress sagged in the middle. Every night I woke up with back pain. Every morning I got up more tired than when I had gone to bed. But beyond the physical pain, that bed represented all the years of sacrifice, all the years of putting others first, all the years of living with the old, the broken, the just enough, while others had the new, the good, the comfortable. I wanted a new bed, a bed that was just mine, that no one else had used. That smelled new. That would let me sleep without pain. That would remind me, even for a moment, that I deserved good things too, that my comfort also mattered, that my tired 72-year-old body also had the right to rest on something decent. So I kept saving. Month after month, I counted the money every night before bed. I'd take it out of the jar carefully, spread it on the old bed, and add it up. $150, $200, $300. Each bill was a small victory, proof that I could still have something that was just mine, something no one could take from me. Or so I thought. Samantha started complaining about her bed. She said it was uncomfortable, that they needed a new one, that Mark woke up with a stiff neck, that she wasn't sleeping well. I listened to her complaints from the kitchen while I washed the dishes from their breakfast, and I felt something strange in my chest, something that felt like fear. "Mark, we have to buy a new bed," Samantha would say almost every night. "Yes, honey, but we don't have the money for that right now," he would reply. And I would breathe a sigh of relief, because I knew that if they bought a new bed, I would never be able to buy mine. The money I was saving was so little, it was barely enough for a simple bed. If they used their money first, I would have to wait who knows how much longer. And my back couldn't wait anymore. My body couldn't wait anymore. My dignity couldn't wait anymore. But Samantha didn't stop insisting. And I knew that eventually Mark would give in. Because Mark always gave in to her. He never told her no. He never set limits. He never made her wait for anything. So I made a decision. A decision that seemed brave at the time, but now I know was just the bare minimum I should have done for myself. I decided to buy my bed before they bought theirs. I decided, for the first time in a long time, to put myself first. I counted the money one last time. $450. It was enough. Just enough for a simple but new bed. A bed that would be mine. Only mine. The next day, while Mark and Samantha were at work, I left the house. I walked to the furniture store downtown. A small store that sold basic but good quality things. I went in with my jar of money in my purse, feeling the weight of those bills against my side. The weight of months of sacrifice. The weight of years of waiting. The salesman greeted me with a professional smile. He was a young man, about 30, with slicked back hair and a crisp white shirt. He asked how he could help me, and I, in a voice that tried to sound confident but trembled a little, told him I was looking for a bed. He showed me several options. Wooden beds, metal beds, beds with carved headboards, simple beds. I looked at the prices and felt my heart sink. Some cost more than $1,000, others $800. I had $450, and every time I saw a higher price, I felt my dreams slipping away. But then the salesman showed me a simple bed, light-colored wood, no elaborate decorations, but firm and new. The mattress was orthopedic, perfect for my back. The price was exactly $430. This one is very popular with our older customers, the salesman said. The mattress has good support and the frame is solid. It will last you many years. I touched the wood. It was smooth, no splinters, no signs of use. I sat on the mattress, and for the first time in years, I felt something firm beneath my body. Something that didn't sag. Something that promised real rest. "I'll take it," I said, before I could change my mind. The salesman smiled wider. He explained that they could deliver it in 3 days, that they would come assemble it at my house, that it was all included in the price. I took my jar out of my purse and counted the bills onto the counter. $430 exactly. I had $20 left over. $20 that I put back in the jar, like a small treasure, proof that I had done something for myself. When I left the store with my receipt in hand, I felt different, lighter, as if I had left something heavy behind in that place. I walked back home, feeling the sun on my face, thinking that maybe, just maybe, things could change, that maybe I could start living for myself, that maybe it wasn't too late to reclaim some of what I had lost all these years. But when I got home, Mark was already there. It was early. He usually didn't get back until 6 in the evening. But that day, he had arrived sooner. He was sitting in the living room with Samantha. They both looked at me when I came in. "Mom, where were you?" Mark asked. There was something in his tone. Something that wasn't genuine concern. It was more like annoyance. As if I had committed some offense by leaving the house without telling them. "I went out to do some shopping," I replied, putting my purse away. Samantha got up from the sofa. She approached me with that smile I knew so well. That smile that didn't reach her eyes. "What did you buy, Eleanor?" "Something for the house?" "I bought something for myself," I said, feeling my voice come out firmer than I expected. There was a brief silence. Samantha exchanged a look with Mark. One of those looks couples share when they don't need words to understand each other. A look that said much more than I wanted to hear. "For yourself?" Samantha repeated. "That's nice, Eleanor. What did you buy?" I didn't want to tell her. Something inside me knew I shouldn't share this information, that I should keep my little victory a secret until the bed was in my room, assembled, real, impossible to take from me. But I also knew they would find out eventually, and I was tired of hiding things, tired of living as if every decision I made needed approval. "I bought a new bed," I said, looking her directly in the eyes. The silence that followed was different, longer, denser. Samantha stopped smiling. Mark shifted uncomfortably on the sofa. "A bed?" Samantha asked slowly. "You bought a new bed?" "Yes. It arrives in 3 days." Samantha turned and looked at Mark. He avoided her gaze. He got up and walked to the kitchen, muttering something about getting water. He left her alone with me. Like always, every time there was a conflict, Mark simply disappeared. "Eleanor," Samantha said in a controlled voice, "we need a new bed too. We've been saying it for months. Our bed is terrible. Mark wakes up in pain every day." "I know," I replied, "but I needed a bed too. Mine is over 20 years old, but we're younger. We work. We need to rest well to be able to keep working. You're retired. You can rest whenever you want during the day." Every word was a blow, not because of its volume. Samantha never yelled. She was too smart for that. She knew verbal violence worked better when disguised as logic, when presented as something reasonable, as something any sensible person would understand. "I need to rest too," I said, feeling my voice start to break. "I'm 72 years old. My back hurts every single night." Samantha sighed. One of those long sighs people use when they want to make you feel like you're being difficult, that you're complicating something that should be simple. "I'm not saying you don't need a bed, Eleanor. I'm just saying maybe you could have waited a little longer. We were going to buy one soon. And when was I going to buy mine?" "No," I answered, because there was no answer. Or rather, the answer was clear, but neither of us wanted to say it out loud. I was never going to buy my bed if I waited for them to buy theirs first. Because after they had what they needed, there would always be something else. There would always be another priority. There would always be another reason for me to wait. Samantha went back to the sofa. She sat down with her arms crossed. She didn't say anything else, but her silence was eloquent. That silence said I had done something wrong, that I had been selfish, that I had betrayed some unwritten agreement that said my needs always came after theirs. Mark returned from the kitchen. He looked at Samantha, then at me. I could see in his face that he wanted to say something, but he didn't know what. Or maybe he did know, but didn't dare, because daring meant picking a side. And Mark had chosen his a long time ago. "Well," he said finally, "it's already bought. Nothing to be done." He went to their room. Samantha followed him. And I was left alone in the living room, feeling the joy of the morning evaporate like water in the desert. I sat in my chair by the window and looked outside. The yard was the same. The sun was still shining, but something had changed. Something had broken that I didn't know if it could be fixed. The next 3 days were strange. Samantha barely spoke to me. When she did, it was with short, dry sentences, devoid of any warmth. Mark avoided being in the same room as me. He left early for work and came back late. When we crossed paths in the kitchen or the hallway, he would look away as if I were just another piece of furniture, as if I didn't even deserve the effort of a hello. I continued with my routine. I cleaned, I cooked, I washed, but now every task felt heavier, as if I were carrying an invisible weight on my shoulders. The weight of the guilt they wanted me to feel. The weight of knowing I had done something they considered unforgivable. The weight of existing in a space where my happiness was an annoyance. But there was something else too. Something small but persistent growing inside me. Something that felt like anger. Not an explosive anger. Not a screaming anger. But a silent anger. A cold anger. An anger that asked why. Why was buying something for myself with my own money a crime? Why was taking care of my health selfish? Why was wanting a decent bed too much to ask? The night before the bed arrived, I couldn't sleep. Not from excitement, but from fear. Fear that something would go wrong. Fear that Samantha would find some way to ruin it. Fear that my small victory would turn into another defeat. Because that's how it had always been. Every time I tried to have something for myself, something happened. Someone needed that money for something else. Someone had an emergency. Someone convinced me I could wait a little longer. But not this time. This time the bed was already paid for. It was on its way. It was real. Or so I thought. The truck arrived at exactly 10 in the morning. I heard the engine from the kitchen where I was making coffee. My heart started to beat faster. It was real. It was happening. My new bed was here. I went out to the yard and saw 2 men getting out of the truck. One was older, with graying temples and large hands used to heavy work. The other was younger, thin, with a cap that said the store's name. They greeted me kindly and asked where I wanted the bed assembled. In the first room on the right, I told them, feeling my voice tremble a bit with contained emotion. They started bringing in the pieces. First the headboard, then the side rails, then the slats that would support the mattress. Everything was wrapped in protective plastic. Everything smelled new, of fresh wood, of possibility. I stood in the doorway watching them work. I couldn't stop smiling. A small, timid smile, as if I wasn't used to feeling joy and my face had forgotten how. The men were efficient. In less than an hour, they had the frame assembled. Then they brought in the mattress. It was bigger than I remembered from the store, firmer, more real. They placed it on the base with care and removed the protective plastic. The mattress was ivory-colored, clean, immaculate. No one had ever slept on it. It was completely mine. "Do you want us to take the old bed?" the older man asked. I looked at my old bed, the worn-out springs that had tortured my back for years, the sagging mattress that made me wake up in pain every morning, the yellowish stains that no amount of washing could remove. 20 years of that bed. 20 years of settling for less than I deserved. "Yes, please," I replied. "Take it away." While they disassembled the old bed and carried it out of my room, I just stared at the new one. I touched the mattress with my fingertips. It was soft but firm. It promised support. It promised rest. It promised nights without pain. I sat on the edge and felt my body settle differently. I didn't sink in. There were no springs digging into my back. There was only decent comfort. The men finished taking out the old bed. They gave me some papers to sign. I thanked them, and they left. When I closed the door and was alone in the house, I walked slowly back to my room. I stood in the doorway and just looked. My new bed, my small act of rebellion, my reminder that I still existed as something more than an unpaid servant. I lay down on it without taking off my shoes, just to feel it. I closed my eyes, and for the first time in a long time, I took a deep breath without feeling the weight of guilt on my chest. I had done something for myself. Something small but significant. Something that said my comfort mattered. That my tired body deserved rest. That I, too, had a right to new and nice things. That night, I made my bed with clean sheets. White sheets I had saved for a special occasion and could never find the right occasion to use. But tonight was the occasion. Tonight deserved special sheets. It deserved to break in my new bed properly. Mark and Samantha came home late from work. I heard their voices in the living room, but I didn't go out to greet them. I was in my room, sitting on my new bed, reading an old magazine I had found in a drawer. It wasn't that I was hiding. It was that, for the first time, I didn't feel the need to be available to them every second. I didn't feel like I had to run and ask if they needed anything, if they wanted to eat, if I could do something for them. After a while, I heard footsteps approaching down the hall. My bedroom door was ajar. Samantha appeared in the doorway. She looked at me, then looked at the bed. Her eyes lingered on the new mattress, the light wood frame, the perfectly stretched white sheets. "So, it arrived," she said, in a tone I couldn't quite decipher. "Yes, it came this morning," I replied, closing the magazine. Samantha entered my room without asking. She walked over to the bed and ran her hand over the mattress. She pressed it with her fingers, as if testing its firmness. Then she sat on the edge. Then she lay down completely, with her shoes on, taking up the space as if it were hers. "It's comfortable," she said, looking at the ceiling. "Very comfortable. Better than ours." I felt something cold run down my spine. Something that felt like a premonition. Something that told me this wasn't going to end well. "It's orthopedic," I said, trying to keep my voice neutral. "The salesman said it's good for the back." Samantha sat up. She stayed seated on my bed, her hands resting on the mattress, looking at me with an expression I hadn't seen before. It was somewhere between calculation and determination, as if she were making a decision right then and there. "Eleanor," she said slowly, "this bed is too good for you." I ran out of air for a second. The words floated in the space between us, as solid as if they were objects I could touch. "What do you mean?" I asked, although I knew exactly what she meant. "I mean, you barely do anything all day. You sleep when you want. You don't have to get up early for work. We do. We need a bed like this. A bed that lets us rest well so we can keep working. Samantha, this is my bed. I bought it with my money. I know. But think about it. You could take our bed. It's perfectly functional. And we could use this one. We'd all be happier that way. It wasn't a question. It was a statement disguised as a suggestion. It was the beginning of what I had feared since the moment I bought the bed. It was Samantha doing what she always did, taking what she wanted, no matter who she had to step on to get it. No, I said. The word came out of my mouth before I could even think it. Firm, clear, definitive. Samantha looked at me, surprised, as if she had never heard that word come from my lips. And she was probably right. I had probably never told her no to anything. I always gave in. I always found a way to justify why what she wanted was more important than what I needed. No, she repeated. Eleanor, be reasonable. It's not fair that you have the best bed in the house when you're the one who needs it least. I am 72 years old, Samantha. My back is in constant pain. I spent 20 years sleeping in a bed that made me wake up sore every morning. This bed is mine. I bought it for myself, and I am not giving it up. Samantha got off the bed. Her face had changed. There was no longer any trace of that fake kindness she used when she wanted something. Now there was only coldness. We're going to talk to Mark about this, she said, and walked out of my room. I sat on my bed, feeling my heart pounding in my chest. I had said no. For the first time in 3 years, I had said no to Samantha. And it felt terrifying and liberating at the same time. Like jumping off a cliff without knowing if there was water below or just rocks waiting. That night, I heard their voices in the other room. Samantha was speaking in a raised tone. Mark responded with short phrases I couldn't make out. I knew what they were talking about. I knew Samantha was convincing him to do something. To convince me. To pressure me. To make me change my mind. I lay down in my new bed, trying to enjoy it, but the fear wouldn't let me. The fear that this was temporary. That tomorrow, I would have to give it up. That my small act of bravery would be crushed, as always. That I would give in again because giving in was easier than fighting. Because giving in kept the peace. Because giving in was what I had always done. But something had changed in me. Something small but real. Something that told me this time was different. That this bed represented more than a piece of furniture. It represented my right to exist. My right to have my own things. My right to say no without having to justify myself to death. I fell asleep late that night, but when I finally did, I slept deeply, without pain, without waking up every hour, without feeling springs digging into my back. I slept like I hadn't slept in years. And when I woke up the next morning, for a moment I forgot where I was. I forgot there was a battle waiting for me. I just felt the comfort of my new bed and smiled. But that smile didn't last long, because when I left my room and went to the kitchen to make coffee, I found Mark and Samantha already awake, sitting at the table, waiting for me. And I knew, just from the way they looked at me, that the battle was just beginning. The following days were strangely quiet. After that morning in the kitchen, where Mark and Samantha looked at me with that mix of frustration and calculation, they didn't mention the bed again. Not directly, at least. It was as if they had decided to let the subject rest. As if they had accepted my refusal and moved on. I wanted to believe it was true. I wanted to believe they had finally heard me. That they had finally respected my decision. That they finally understood that I also had the right to own something without having to justify it or share it. The mornings returned to their usual routine. I'd get up, make coffee, fix breakfast. Mark would leave for work early. Samantha would leave half an hour later. And I'd be left alone in the house, cleaning, tidying, doing the chores no one else did but everyone expected to be done. But there was something different now. Something subtle had changed in me. When I cleaned, I no longer did it with that heavy sense of obligation weighing me down. When I cooked, I no longer felt I existed only to serve. When I did laundry, I no longer felt invisible. Because every time I passed my room and saw my new bed through the open door, I remembered that I had done something for myself. That I had chosen my well-being. That I had said no and the world hadn't ended. I slept well for the first time in years. I would lie down and my body would relax on the firm mattress. I didn't wake up in pain. I didn't spend the night tossing and turning, looking for a comfortable position that didn't exist. I just slept. And waking up without pain was like discovering a superpower I never knew I could have. One afternoon, while I was watering the plants in the yard, my neighbor Helen came over to the fence. Helen was a woman my age, a widow who lived alone in the house next door. We had been friends many years ago, when our children were little. But over time, that friendship had faded. Not for any specific reason. Just because life gets small when you live for others and forget that you also need friends, conversations, and laughter that isn't about housework. "Eleanor, I've been meaning to tell you something for days," Helen said, leaning on the fence. "You look different." "Different how?" I asked, setting the watering can on the ground. "I don't know." "More. Awake. Like you've finally gotten a good night's sleep for the first time in a long time." I laughed. It was a genuine laugh that surprised even me. "I bought a new bed. It's amazing how much a good night's sleep can change your life." Helen smiled. "I'm happy for you. You deserve it. You've always worked so hard." Her words touched me in an unexpected way, because it had been a long time since anyone told me I deserved something. A long time since anyone had acknowledged my effort. A long time since anyone had seen me as more than a function in the house. "Thank you, Helen," I said, feeling my eyes water a bit. "Everything all right at home?" she asked, glancing toward the windows where the closed curtains of Mark and Samantha's room were visible. I hesitated. Part of me wanted to tell her everything. I wanted to vent. I wanted to tell her how difficult these last 3 years had been, how I felt invisible, how they treated me as if my only function was to serve. But another part of me, the part used to keeping family secrets, told me not to talk. That airing my dirty laundry in public was bad manners. That families solve their problems behind closed doors. "Everything's fine," I lied. "Just the usual." Helen looked at me as if she knew it wasn't true, but she didn't press. She patted my hand and went back to her house. I stayed in the yard a while longer, thinking about that conversation, thinking about how easy it was to lie, how automatic it had become to pretend everything was fine when it clearly wasn't. The nights continued to be my refuge. I would get in my bed, and for a moment, I could forget everything else. I could forget Samantha's glares when she walked past my room. I could forget the awkward silences during dinner. I could forget the tension that hung in the air like invisible but present smoke. A week after my bed arrived, I came home from grocery shopping and found Samantha in my room. She was standing next to my bed, looking at it as if she were evaluating something. When she saw me in the doorway, she didn't startle. She didn't apologize for being in my private space without permission. She just looked at me. "I was just seeing how your bed looks in the natural light," she said in that sweet voice she used when she was lying. "It looks fine," I replied, setting the grocery bags on the floor. Samantha ran her hand over the mattress again. It was the third time I had seen her make that gesture, as if she were memorizing the feeling, as if she were preparing for something. "Yes, it looks very good," she said, and left my room without another word. That night, I didn't sleep as well as the previous nights. There was something about the way Samantha had been in my room, something about the way she had touched my bed, something that unsettled me. But I told myself I was being paranoid, that I was seeing problems where there were none, that Samantha had accepted the situation and I needed to stop looking for conflict. The weekend was particularly quiet. Mark and Samantha left early on Saturday and didn't come back until late at night. I spent the day doing small tasks around the house. I washed the windows. I organized the kitchen pantry. I sewed a button that had fallen off one of my blouses. Simple things that kept me busy but also gave me a sense of control over my small world. In the afternoon, I sat in the yard with a cup of tea. The sun was setting, and the sky was tinted with oranges and pinks. It was cool but not cold. It was one of those perfect moments where the world seems to pause and just let you exist without any rush. I thought about my life, about how I had gotten here, about all the decisions I had made or that had been made for me, about all the times I had given in, stayed quiet, accepted, about all the years I had lived on autopilot. as if my life were a movie I was watching but not really participating in. And I thought about my bed, about that small act of rebellion it had been to buy it, about how something so simple had started to change the way I saw myself. I was no longer just Eleanor, the mother who serves. I was no longer just Eleanor, the one who cleans and stays quiet. I was also Eleanor, the one who says no. Eleanor, the one who puts herself first every once in a while. Eleanor, the one who deserves good things. Sunday dawned rainy, a soft rain that tapped against the windows with a steady rhythm. I liked the rain. I had always liked it. There was something comforting about that sound. Something that made the outside world seem distant and my house feel like a true refuge. I made lunch early. I made vegetable soup and homemade bread. The smell filled the house and made me feel productive, useful, but in a different way. I was no longer useful because someone expected it of me. I was useful because I had chosen to do something I enjoyed doing, cooking because I wanted to cook, not because it was my obligation, but because it was my choice. Mark and Samantha ate lunch without saying much. They ate my soup, praised the bread, and then went to their room. I heard them talking in low voices. I couldn't make out the words, but the tone was serious. They were discussing something, planning something. That night, when I got into my bed, I tried to shake off that feeling of unease. I told myself everything was fine, that the silence between us was just the new normal, that they had accepted I had boundaries, that they finally respected me. But deep down, in that part of me that had learned to read silences and glances after so many years, I knew something was brewing, something that would break this artificial calm, something that would test my newfound ability to say no. I fell asleep with the rain still falling outside. The sound was relaxing, but my dreams were restless. I dreamed my bed disappeared, that I walked into my room and in its place was the old bed with the worn-out springs, that I looked all over the house but couldn't find it, that I asked, and no one knew what I was talking about, as if it had never existed, as if it had all been just a dream within another dream. I woke up with a start in the middle of the night. My heart was pounding. I reached out and touched the mattress beneath my body. It was there. It was real. It was still mine. I took a deep breath and lay back down. But sleep didn't return easily. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, listening to the rain, feeling that weight of anticipation that comes before something important happens. I didn't know what it was. I didn't know when it would happen. But I knew, with that quiet certainty that comes from instinct, that the calm was about to end, that the real storm was just beginning, and that this time, when it arrived, I would have to be ready not to give in, not to go back to being the woman who always said yes, to defend the little I had managed to reclaim as my own. I closed my eyes and waited for the sunrise. On Monday morning, Samantha didn't go to work. She said she felt sick, that her head hurt, that she needed to stay home. Mark left as usual, leaving her lying in their bed, and I was left alone in the house with her. This wasn't common. Usually I had the mornings to myself. They were my hours of peace before they returned in the afternoon. I made breakfast and took a cup of tea to her room. I knocked softly on the door before entering. Samantha was lying down, staring at the ceiling, with an expression that didn't look like someone who was sick. It looked more like someone who was thinking, calculating. "I brought you tea," I said, leaving the cup on the nightstand. "Thanks, Eleanor," she replied without looking at me. I left her room and went back to the kitchen. I washed the breakfast dishes, wiped the table, swept the floor. The whole time, I felt that presence in the house, that awareness that I wasn't alone, that Samantha was there, awake, moving through the rooms when I wasn't looking. Around noon, I was hanging clothes in the yard when I heard my bedroom door open. I froze, a damp sheet in my hands, listening. Footsteps. Samantha was in my room again. I dropped the sheet into the basket and walked back into the house. When I got to my room, I found her lying on my bed, not sitting on the edge like the time before, lying down completely, her head on my pillow, her eyes closed, as if she were testing what it felt to sleep there. "Samantha," I said from the doorway. "What are you doing?" She opened her eyes slowly. She looked at me without any shame, without any apology in her expression. "I wanted to see if it's really as comfortable as it seems," she said without moving. "And yes, it's incredibly comfortable." "Eleanor, I can't believe you're keeping this all to yourself." "It's my bed," I said, feeling my voice harden. "I bought it for myself." "I know. You already said that. But it's a shame that the best bed in the house belongs to someone who doesn't need it as much as we do." She sat up slowly, perched on the edge of my bed, and looked at me with that expression I already knew. That expression that said she was about to ask for something, but would make it sound like the most reasonable thing in the world. "Eleanor, I've been thinking a lot these past few days," she began in a soft voice, "and I think we need to talk seriously about this. Mark and I really need a better bed. He's hurting his back. He goes to work in pain. It's affecting his performance. He could lose his job if this continues." "Then buy a new bed," I replied. "We don't have the money right now. We just paid the car insurance. And we have other debts. We can't spend $400 on a bed when you already have a perfect one that you could share with us." "I am not sharing my bed, Samantha. I'm not asking you to share it. I'm asking you to be reasonable. To think about your son, about his health, about his well-being. Don't you care that Mark is suffering?" There it was, the weapon they always used. Guilt, maternal responsibility. The constant reminder that a good mother always sacrifices everything for her children, that a good mother never puts her needs before her family's, that a good mother gives without expecting anything in return. "I care about Mark," I said slowly. "But this bed is mine. I bought it with my money. I need it for my back, and I am not giving it up." Samantha got off the bed. She walked toward me with slow, measured steps. She stopped so close I could smell her perfume. An expensive perfume I could never afford to buy. A perfume she probably bought with the money they saved by living in my house rent-free. "Eleanor," she said in a low voice, almost a whisper, "I don't want this to become a problem. I don't want to fight with you. But you need to understand that Mark and I are considering moving out if things don't get better here." It was a threat, disguised as concern, but it was clearly a threat. She was telling me that if I didn't give in, if I didn't give them what they wanted, they would leave. And they would leave me alone. Because that was the worst thing that could happen to me. Right? Being left alone. Without my son. Without family. Just me in this big, empty house. But as Samantha looked at me, waiting for her threat to take effect, something strange happened inside me. Instead of feeling fear, instead of feeling the desperation she expected, I felt relief. A small but real relief. Because the idea of being alone, of having my house to myself again, of not having to walk on eggshells every day, didn't sound like a nightmare. It sounded like peace. "If you need to move out, I'll understand," I said, looking her directly in the eyes. Samantha blinked. She didn't expect that answer. She expected me to beg, to burst into tears, to immediately offer to give them the bed just so they wouldn't leave. But I did none of that. I just stood there in front of her, firm, calm, holding her gaze. "You can't be serious," she said after a moment of silence. "I'm very serious. If living here isn't working for you, you are free to find another place. I won't hold you back." Samantha's face changed. The surprise turned into something colder, something more calculated. She turned and walked out of my room without another word. I heard her bedroom door slam shut. Then I heard her voice on the phone. She was calling Mark. She was telling him what happened. She was planning her next move. I sat on my bed, feeling my hands tremble. Not from fear, from adrenaline, from that energy that comes after doing something you've never done before. I had defended my territory. I had set clear boundaries. I had let go of the fear of being alone because I finally understood that being alone was better than being with people who made you feel like you didn't exist. The rest of the day was tense. Samantha didn't leave her room. I continued with my chores, but every movement felt electric. Like I was waiting for something to explode at any moment. Like the air in the house was charged with something invisible but palpable. Mark came home earlier than usual. I heard his car park in front of the house. I heard the front door open. I heard voices in the other room. Samantha was telling him her version of what happened. And I knew that what she was telling him wasn't exactly the truth. I knew she was painting me as the villain, as the selfish mother who preferred a bed over her own son's well-being. Half an hour later, Mark knocked on my bedroom door. He came in without waiting for an answer. He looked tired. He had deep, dark circles under his eyes, and his shoulders were slumped. For a moment, I felt sorry for him. For the man he had become, trapped between his mother and his wife, unable to make any decision other than to just give in to whoever yelled the loudest. "Mom, we need to talk," he said, sitting on the edge of my bed without asking permission. "Let's talk," I replied from the chair by the window. "Samantha told me what happened today. She told me you said we could leave if we don't like living here. I told her that if they needed to move out, I would understand. That's not the same thing." "It's practically the same thing, Mark. You're kicking us out." "I am not kicking you out. I am saying that I am not giving up my bed, that I bought it for myself and it's mine. And if that's enough reason for you two to want to leave, then that's your decision, not mine." Mark ran his hands over his face. He sighed deeply. He looked at the window, at the ceiling, anywhere but at me. "I don't understand why you have to be so stubborn about this," he said finally. "It's just a bed, Mom. Just a bed. Is it worth breaking up the family over a bed? Is it worth breaking up the family because your wife wants to take the only thing I've bought for myself in years?" I replied, feeling my voice break a little. "Is it worth making me feel guilty for having something of my own? Is it worth treating me like I don't matter?" "Nobody is saying you don't matter. Yes, you are. You say it every time Samantha comes into my room without permission. You say it every time you make me feel selfish for wanting something for myself. You say it every time you act like this house is yours and I'm just an annoying guest." Mark fell silent. He knew I was right. He knew it, but he wasn't going to admit it. Because admitting it meant having to take a stand. And Mark had long since stopped taking a stand when it came to defending me. "Samantha says this can be resolved easily," he said after a long silence, "that we can swap beds. You take ours and we take yours. Everyone's happy. I won't be happy with that solution." "Why not? It's a perfectly functional bed." "Because it's not my bed. Because I bought a new bed for myself. Because I am 72 years old and I deserve to sleep on something comfortable. Because I am tired of giving in, Mark. I'm tired of being invisible. I'm tired of my needs always coming at the bottom of the list." My voice had risen. I wasn't yelling, but it was close. The words came out with a force I didn't know I had inside me, as if they had been building up for years and were finally finding their way out. Mark got up from the bed. He walked to the door but stopped before leaving. "Samantha is getting the moving truck for the day after tomorrow," he said without looking at me. "She's going to take this bed. We'll leave our bed in its place. It's what's fair, Mom. It's what any reasonable person would do." And he left. He closed the door behind him, leaving me alone in my room with those words hanging in the air like toxic smoke. "She's going to take this bed." As if it were already decided. As if my opinion didn't matter. As if I had no say in what happened to my own things in my own house. I sat in the chair, feeling my whole body tremble, not from fear, from rage. A clean, clear, justified rage. A rage that told me this couldn't go on, that the time had come to do more than just say no, that the time had come to act. I didn't have dinner with them that night. I stayed in my room with the door closed, sitting on my bed, staring at the walls as if they could give me an answer. I heard their voices in the kitchen, the sound of plates, the water running, life going on as if nothing had happened, as if they hadn't just announced they were going to steal the only thing I had managed to buy for myself in years. Because that's what it was. A theft. It didn't matter how they justified it. It didn't matter what excuses they used. They were going to take something that was mine without my permission. They were going to come into my room, disassemble my bed, take it away, and leave theirs in its place as if they were doing me a favor. I lay down on my bed that night, knowing it might be one of the last times I'd sleep in it. The thought made my stomach churn. I had waited so long for this. I had saved every dollar with so much sacrifice. I had dreamed for months of having something comfortable to rest on. And now, they were going to take it from me. Simply because they wanted to. Because they decided to. Because I didn't have the right to say no in my own house. But as I lay in the darkness, staring at the ceiling, feeling the firmness of the mattress under my back, something began to change inside me. The sadness transformed into something different, something more solid, something more dangerous to those who thought they could keep walking all over me. I got out of bed and turned on the light. I opened my nightstand drawer and took out an envelope I had kept there for years. An envelope with important papers. Papers I had almost forgotten existed. The deed to the house. The documents that proved this house, every brick, every window, every inch of floor, was in my name. Only my name. I had put them there when I bought the house 30 years ago. I had looked at them from time to time over the years as a reminder of what I had achieved, of how I had worked cleaning office buildings at night, saving every cent to be able to buy this place, to have something of my own, to leave something for Mark when I was gone. But now, holding those papers in my hands, I understood something I hadn't understood before. This house wasn't Mark's. Not yet. It was mine. And as long as I was alive, as long as I was here, I made the rules. Not Samantha. Not Mark. Me. I read the document slowly. Every word. Every clause. Every signature. It was all there. It was all clear. This house legally belonged to me. And so did everything inside it, including my new bed, including every piece of furniture I had bought with my work, including the right to decide who lived here and who didn't. I put the papers back in the envelope, but this time I didn't put it in the drawer. I left it on the nightstand, visible, ready to be used, because I knew I was going to need it. I knew the time had come to remind Mark and Samantha that this was not their house, that I was not a tenant in my own home, that I had power, I just had never used it. I got back into bed, but no longer with sadness, with determination, with a clarity I hadn't felt in a long time. I was going to let them call the truck. I was going to let them make their plans. I was going to let them believe they had won. And then, when the time came, I would show them how wrong they were. The next morning, I got up early as always. I made breakfast as always. I set the table as always. When Mark and Samantha came out of their room, I served them coffee as always. But I was no longer the same. On the outside, everything seemed normal. Inside, something fundamental had changed. Samantha looked at me with that barely disguised expression of triumph. She thought she had won. She thought my silence meant surrender. She thought that by the next day, her problem would be solved and she would have the bed she wanted. "Good morning, Eleanor," she said with false sweetness. "I hope you slept well. Enjoy these last few days in your new bed, because tomorrow it will be ours." I didn't answer. I just poured her more coffee and went back to the kitchen. I heard her laugh, a satisfied laugh, a laugh that said she had gotten what she wanted and I couldn't do anything to stop her. Mark said nothing. He ate his breakfast in silence, avoiding my gaze as usual. When he finished, he got up and left for work without saying goodbye. Samantha stayed a while longer, drinking her coffee slowly, watching me as I washed the dishes. "You know, Eleanor," she said finally, "this all could have been much easier if you had just been reasonable from the beginning. Oh well, at least it's settled now. The truck is coming tomorrow at 10. Mark already hired them. They're going to disassemble your bed, take it to our room, and bring ours in here. Simple." "I see," I said, without turning to look at her. "I'm glad you finally understand. This is what's best for everyone. You'll see, the bed we're leaving you isn't that bad. It's perfectly usable. Perfectly usable. As if I only deserved what was usable. As if the new, the good, the comfortable was only for them. As if my pain didn't matter. As if my effort was worthless." Samantha got up and went to the living room. I heard her turn on the television. I heard her laugh at some show. I heard her talking on the phone with a friend, telling her how she had managed to convince her mother-in-law to swap beds. How it was so easy to handle old people when you know which buttons to push. Every word was a stab, but I kept washing the dishes. I kept cleaning the kitchen. I kept acting as if nothing was wrong, because I had learned something important these past few days. I had learned that sometimes silence is more powerful than words. That sometimes waiting for the right moment is better than reacting immediately. That sometimes letting others believe they've won is the best way to prepare your real move. The rest of the day was unbearable. Every hour felt like an eternity. Samantha didn't stop making comments about the bed, about how she was going to redecorate their room now that she had a decent piece of furniture, about how Mark would finally be able to rest well, about how I should be grateful they were leaving me their old bed instead of leaving me with nothing. I nodded. I smiled when necessary. I answered in monosyllables. On the outside, I was the same old Eleanor, the one who gave in, the one who accepted, the one who didn't cause problems. But on the inside, I was counting the hours. I was preparing. I was waiting. That night, when everyone was asleep, I left my room and went to the kitchen. I needed air. I needed to think. I poured myself a glass of water and sat by the window, looking out at the dark yard. The moon weakly illuminated the plants. Everything was still. Everything was silent. I thought about my life, about all the years I had lived making myself small, about all the times I had swallowed humiliation just to keep the peace, about all the occasions I had put others first until there was nothing left of me, about how I had confused love with submission, about how I had believed that being a good mother meant disappearing as a person, but no more. Tomorrow would be different. Tomorrow I would show them that the woman they knew, the woman who always gave in, had woken up, and the woman who was awake was someone they didn't know. Someone who was no longer afraid. Someone who finally understood her own worth. I went back to my room and lay on my bed. I ran my hands over the mattress, memorizing the feeling. Not because I was going to lose it, but because I wanted to remember this moment. The moment before the storm. The moment before I took my life back. The moment before I showed them that I had teeth, too. I just never had a reason to show them. I slept deeply that night. Better than all the nights before. Because I knew what was going to happen. I knew what I was going to do. And that certainty gave me a peace I hadn't felt in years. The peace of someone who has finally made a decision. Of someone who has finally said enough. Of someone who is finally ready to defend what is hers. I woke up before dawn. I got dressed with care. I combed my hair. I looked at myself in the mirror, and for the first time in a long time, I recognized the woman looking back at me. She wasn't the shadow I had become. It was me. The real me. The one who had always been there, but had forgotten how to come out. I made coffee. I made breakfast. I set the table as always. When Mark and Samantha got up, everything seemed normal. They ate calmly, chatting about the day, about the truck arriving at 10, about how they would organize the bed swap. I listened to them in silence. I drank my coffee slowly. I watched the kitchen clock. The hands moved slowly but surely. 9 o'clock, 9:30. Every minute brought me closer to the moment when everything would change. The moment when Eleanor, the invisible, would become Eleanor, the one who doesn't back down. Eleanor, the owner of her own life. Eleanor, the one who finally says no and means it, no matter the consequences. At 9:45, Samantha fixed her hair in the hallway mirror. She was excited. You could see it in every movement. She was finally getting what she wanted. She had finally broken the stubborn old woman who had dared to say no. Mark was checking his phone, waiting for the call from the truck, waiting for confirmation that they were on their way, waiting for the moment they could execute their plan without me being able to do anything to stop them. But what neither of them knew was that I was waiting too, and that my plan was very different from theirs, and that in less than 15 minutes, everything they thought they knew about me was going to change forever. At 10 o'clock sharp, I heard the truck's engine, the same sound I had heard when they brought my new bed just 2 weeks ago. But this time, it was different. This time, they were coming to take it away, or so they thought. Samantha peeked through the living room window. "They're here," she said with that smile I knew so well, that smile of victory, that smile that said she had won. Mark got up from the sofa and walked toward the door. But I was faster. I stood in front of the door before he could, blocking his path. Mark looked at me, confused. "Mom, move aside. We have to let them in." "No," I said, my voice calm but firm. Samantha approached from the window. "Eleanor, don't start this again. We already talked. It's already decided." "Yes, it's decided," I replied, "but not the way you think." I opened the door. The movers from the truck were standing in front of the house, the same men who had brought my bed. The older one recognized me and gave me a nod. "Good morning, ma'am," he said. "We're here for a move. Is this the place?" "Yes, this is it," I replied. "But there's been a change of plans." Samantha tried to interrupt, but I held up a hand. For the first time in 3 years, I was the one silencing someone. And it worked. Samantha stood there with her mouth open, the words stuck in her throat. I turned to the movers, ignoring the glares from Mark and Samantha. "Gentlemen, you can load everything you need. There's no problem with that." The older man took out his clipboard. "Perfect. We have noted that we're moving a bed from one room to another." "Which room is it?" "There's a mistake in your notes," I said calmly. "You won't be moving any beds." "What do you mean, no?" Samantha shouted from behind. "Mark, say something. Tell them we're paying for this service." But I kept talking to the movers as if Samantha didn't exist, as if her screams were just meaningless background noise. "What you are going to load are the belongings of these 2 people," I said, pointing to Mark and Samantha. "All their clothes, their boxes, their personal items, everything that belongs to them. Because they are moving out of this house today." The silence that followed was absolute. Even the truck's engine seemed to go quiet for a moment. The movers looked at me, confused. Mark was frozen, and Samantha, for the first time since I'd known her, was speechless. I took the envelope with the house deed from my apron pocket. I opened it slowly, with deliberate movements, savoring every second of the shocked expressions on their faces. "This house," I said, showing them the documents, "is in my name. Only my name. Every piece of furniture here, every plate, everything you see, was bought with my money, with my work, with my years of effort." I showed the papers to the movers. They looked at them, nodded, and the older man handed the envelope back to me respectfully. "Understood, ma'am. Can you show us which room contains the belongings we need to load?" Samantha finally found her voice. "This is insane. Eleanor, you can't just kick us out like this. We're your family. Mark is your son." I turned to her. There was no longer fear in my eyes, no more doubt. Only the cold clarity of someone who has finally found her limit and has no intention of backing down. "It's precisely because Mark is my son that this hurts so much," I said. "Because I expected him to defend me, to protect me, to see me as more than just a servant. But instead, he allowed you to treat me as if I didn't matter. He allowed you to enter my room without permission. He allowed you to try to steal the only thing I bought for myself." "We weren't stealing," Mark said finally, his voice weak. "We were just going to swap the beds. Without my permission. Without my consent. Against my will. What do you call that?" Mark didn't answer. Because there was no answer. Because he knew I was right. Because deep down, even if he didn't want to admit it, he knew this had gone too far. Samantha tried another angle. "You're going to pay dearly for this, Eleanor." "I'm not." But she couldn't finish the sentence. Because in that instant, the movers were already entering the house. Not to take my bed. To take their things. To take their boxes, their clothes, their belongings out of my house. Out of my space. Out of my life. "You can't do this," Samantha yelled as the men walked past her, carrying a box of her clothes. "Mark, do something." But Mark did nothing. He just stood in the middle of the living room, watching his things being taken out. Looking at me with an expression I couldn't interpret. Was it surprise? Was it respect? Was it, finally, the recognition that his mother was not the invisible woman he thought he knew? The movers worked quickly. They took out clothes, boxes, shoes, bags, everything that belonged to Mark and Samantha. Everything they had brought when they came to live with me 3 years ago. 3 years that had been the most difficult of my life. 3 years in which I had lost my voice, my space, my dignity. But those 3 years ended today. Samantha tried to stop one of the movers. "Not that box. Leave it here." "Ma'am," the man said with professional patience, "we are following the instructions of the homeowner. If you have a problem, you'll have to take it up with her." Samantha spun around to face me, her eyes filled with fury. "You are going to regret this. You'll be left all alone. Without family. Without anyone. Is that what you want?" "I want peace," I replied. "I want to sleep in my own bed without feeling guilty. I want to walk through my house without feeling like I'm an inconvenience. I want to exist without having to justify every little decision I make. And if that means being alone, then yes, that is exactly what I want. For the first time since this all started, I saw something different in Samantha's eyes. It wasn't regret. It was recognition. The recognition that she had underestimated the woman in front of her, that she had believed she could keep pushing without consequences, that she had mistaken kindness for weakness. The movers finished bringing out the last box. The truck was full of Mark and Samantha's belongings. Everything they had accumulated over 3 years of living in my house was now packed up, ready to go, ready to leave me in peace. The older man approached me with a paper to sign. "Any specific address for the delivery, ma'am?" I looked at Mark. He avoided my gaze. He stared at the floor like a child caught doing something wrong. Samantha, on the other hand, held my gaze, that mix of rage and disbelief still not fully processing what was happening. "They will tell you where to take their things," I said, signing the paper. "It's not my problem anymore." Samantha took a step toward me. "This isn't over. We'll be back. Mark has rights to this house." "No," I said, my voice firm. "He doesn't. This house is mine. The deed proves it. And as long as I am alive, I decide who lives here and who doesn't. You're his mother. Someday, this house will be his anyway. Maybe, but that day is not today. And until that day comes, I make the rules. And my rule is simple. In my house, I am respected. And you two stopped respecting me a long time ago." Mark finally spoke. His voice came out broken, small. "Mom, it doesn't have to be this way. We can talk. We can fix this." I walked closer to him. My son, the child I had held in my arms, the child I had worked for until my bones ached, the man who had become someone I no longer recognized. "Mark," I said softly, "we had 3 years to talk. 3 years where I tried to tell you how I felt. 3 years where I stayed quiet because I didn't want to cause problems. 3 years where I waited for you to see me, to defend me, to treat me like your mother and not your housekeeper. I never saw you as a housekeeper. Then why did you never defend me when Samantha disrespected me? Why did you never say anything when she came into my room without asking? Why did you agree to take my bed without ever asking me?" He didn't answer, because there was no answer that could justify the unjustifiable. The movers were waiting by the truck. Samantha had already gotten into the car, her arms crossed, furious, defeated. Mark stood in front of me for a few seconds more. "Are you really going to do this?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper. "I already did," I replied. Mark nodded slowly. He walked to the car where Samantha was waiting. Before getting in, he turned back one last time. He opened his mouth as if to say something, but the words didn't come. He just got in the car and started the engine. The truck followed him. I watched them drive down the street. I watched them get smaller and smaller until they disappeared around the corner. And when I couldn't see them anymore, I closed the door slowly. I stood in the entryway of my house. My house. Not Mark's house. Not Samantha's house. My house. The silence was absolute. But it wasn't the heavy silence from before. It wasn't the silence filled with tension and unsaid words. It was a clean silence. A silence that promised peace. I walked through the rooms. The house seemed bigger without them. Emptier, but also more mine. I went into the room that had been Mark and Samantha's. The bed was unmade. There were clothes thrown on the floor that the movers hadn't picked up. There was trash piled up. There was the mess of people who never cleaned up after themselves because there was always someone else to do it for them. I opened the windows. I let the fresh air in. I would clean later. I would tidy up later. For now, I just wanted to breathe. I just wanted to feel this moment when I had finally defended what was mine. When I had finally set boundaries. When I had finally chosen my peace over the comfort of others. I went to my room. My bed was still there. Untouched. Mine. I sat on the edge and ran my hands over the mattress. This whole problem had started over a bed. A simple bed that represented so much more than it seemed. It represented my right to own things. My right to take care of myself. My right to say no without having to justify myself. I lay down on it, fully clothed. I closed my eyes, and for the first time in 3 years, I felt something I had forgotten how to feel. I felt that my house was truly mine, that my space was truly mine, that my life was truly mine. I don't know how long I stayed like that, just lying there, feeling the weight of everything that had happened. I felt sadness for Mark, for the son I had lost somewhere along the way, for the relationship we never managed to build as adults. But I also felt relief, a deep, true relief. I got up and went to the kitchen. I made coffee just for myself. I poured it into my favorite mug, the one I had put away because Samantha always used it without asking. I sat by the window and watched the garden, sipping slowly. The phone rang. It was Helen, my neighbor, Eleanor. I saw everything. "Are you all right?" "I'm all right, Helen. Better than all right. Do you want me to come over? Do you need company?" I thought about her offer. Company sounded nice, but so did solitude. Chosen solitude. The solitude that isn't abandonment, but freedom. "Maybe later," I replied. "Right now, I just want to be with myself for a while. I understand. When you want to talk, I'm here." I hung up the phone and went back to looking out the window. The sun was shining brightly. The plants in the yard swayed in the breeze. Everything was the same, but everything was different. I knew Mark would try to come back, that he would call, that he would send messages, that he might even apologize, and I would have to decide then what to do, whether to open the door or keep it closed, whether to give another chance or protect my peace. But that was a decision for later, for another day, for when I was ready. For now, I just wanted to enjoy this moment when Eleanor, the invisible, had become Eleanor, the defender, Eleanor, the one who says no, Eleanor, the owner of her own life. I finished my coffee and washed the mug. Then I went to my room and changed my clothes. I put on something comfortable. I looked at myself in the mirror and smiled. I was the same woman as always, but I was also completely different. I was the woman who had finally learned that loving yourself isn't selfish, that setting boundaries doesn't make you a bad person, that defending what's yours isn't being mean. That night, I lay in my new bed with the windows open. The cool air filled the room. The sheets smelled clean. The mattress was firm beneath my back. And for the first time in 72 years, I felt completely at peace with myself. I had lost my son, at least for now. I had lost the idea of family I had always wanted to have. But I had gained something much more important. I had gained myself back. I had regained my voice. I had regained my space. I had regained my life. And as I closed my eyes to sleep, I thought of all the women like me, all the mothers who make themselves invisible, all the ones who give in and stay quiet, all the ones who confuse love with submission. And I wished that they, too, would one day find their own bed, their own boundary, their own voice. Because we all deserve to sleep in peace. We all deserve to have our own things. We all deserve to be seen, respected, and valued. And I, finally, after so many years, had learned that lesson. I closed my eyes and fell into a deep sleep, without pain, without fear, without guilt, only peace.